Hi, welcome to our weekly Wednesday workshop recap video about our workshop called Luck Has Nothing to Do with It. This was a workshop that we presented about how to tackle midterm exams without relying on luck. A lot of students go into these exams thinking that if they're lucky with the questions on the exams and the professors ask the questions they know the answers to, they'll do well. That's not the case. I mean, it is the case that if this happens, you might do well. But a lot of students think that this they're going to rely on this luck. And actually, we have some real tips to make sure that you are at your best on test day without relying on this anxiety. Now, thinking about whether the professor will put the material on the exam, or not, that is going to be anxiety inducing. So we want you to get to the start line of this exam without having that anxiety that's really debilitating and it's causing you to lose sleep or anything like that. So let's go through some tips. First of all, consistency is greater than cramming. If you try to cram a lot of information into your head all at once, you're really not going to capture most of it. So, the best thing to do instead of cramming, especially if cramming just involves reading your notes, the best thing to do is to consistently practice actively recalling information. We're going to go into what that means in a minute. But even if your test is in 3 days, you can still do this effectively without pulling an all nighter. All nighters are really, really, really detrimental to your grades, generally speaking. We'll talk about that a little later too. So you're obviously going to do your best if you have been harnessing the idea of spaced practice for longer, like over the course of the entire unit you're being tested on. So think flashcards, daily practice problems, this kind of thing. You are actually trying to recall the information very regularly for short amounts of time. You're not sitting there for 6 hours a day doing flashcards or daily practice problems. You're sitting there for 30 minutes doing flashcards and daily practice problems. Now, this is something you can harness for the next unit of a class. Say you're in chemistry and you really are a little bit behind it right now for this test and you're a little bit freaked out. We're going to give you some strategies for what to do now. But, thinking about for the next unit, making sure you're adding daily practice problems to your routine to kind of avoid that anxiety, avoid that cramming um, need, just generally. Okay, if the test is coming up, let's talk about how to do short term spaced practice. A lot of students just read their notes. They read them over and over again and they think that they're going to get into their head. They don't. Only about 10% of that information is going to stay in your head because what the notes are doing is giving you a recall bias. So you look at the notes and you think, "Yeah, I know that." Because you're looking at it like you're looking at the definition. You're like, "Yeah, I know that. I totally know that." That's not true. If you had that on a flashcard and you said like, "What is this thing?" you might have zero idea what that was. So finding a way to actively recall the information like flashcards or practice problems or covering up the answers to content questions. Maybe you're in bio and you get a study guide of learning objectives. And so, like, getting the blank version of that study guide and trying to actively recall each one without any notes. This is the thing that's going to really help you understand whether or not you're kind of ready for that test and whether or not you do actually know that material. So, think about the spaced practice thing you want to do. So, maybe that's problems, maybe that's a practice test, maybe that's a learning objectives study guide, maybe it's whatever it is, things from the textbook, it doesn't matter. Practice them for a short period of time, 10 to 15 minutes, maybe up to 20 minutes. Then go do something else for, I say, an hour here. Maybe just like, let's say you start at 10:30 a.m. This is arbitrary. You can start at any time. Here's just one example of how you could do that. You'd do your studying from 10:30 to 10:45. Then from 10:45 to 11:30, you take a break. Or, I mean, maybe not just take a break. You're doing something else. Maybe you have homework to do or another assignment. Maybe it's even for the same class. It doesn't matter. You're not doing the spaced practice, like active recall practice. You're doing something else. At 11:30, you come back and you do another 15 minutes of spaced practice of chemistry problems or bio flashcards or study guide, whatever you're doing. And this is going to harness the forgetting curve. So you're going to distract yourself and forget a little bit of the information. That's going to make it a little bit harder even in 45 minutes when you come back and you try to do that again. But making it a little harder is going to get the material to stick more with each repetition. You're distracting yourself and then you're coming back to the thing. You're doing this little boomerang thing back and forth to your material that you're trying to learn. And this is kind of tricking your brain into absorbing as much of it as possible. So if you try to do 6 hours of chemistry practice problems, your brain's probably going to stop working well after about 30 minutes. So that's why this is useful. Let's say you've got an entire day and you have a bunch of stuff to get through, and like 6 or 7 hours were going to be devoted to studying. That means you can get 6 or 7 short bursts of chemistry practice problems in this time frame, and you still have those 45 minutes, of each hour to do other schoolwork. So you're getting a lot done and you're studying for the test without then having to do that chemistry all night and pull an all-nighter, which is, like I said, not great. Okay, the next thing is practice tests. So, are they included in Blackboard? A lot of teachers actually do put practice tests in their Blackboard pages. Have you checked? You should check. Sometimes the professors will tell you there's practice tests and they'll tell you where they are. Some professors will not. Some professors expect you to explore Blackboard on your own because they really need to use class time for other things. So, if you can find a practice test, or maybe more than one practice test, you should take it. Take every practice test you can find. If your professor gives you 5 practice tests, do 5 practice tests, space them out once a day. But this is absolutely the best thing you can do to prepare yourself for the real thing. Think of it like your driver's test. If you have a driver's license, you know that you couldn't have gotten behind the wheel for that driver's test without actually driving the car. The best thing you can do to prepare for a driver's test is drive the car. So the best thing you can do for a chemistry exam is practice the types of problems that's going to be on the chemistry exam. That way, your brain will kind of know what to do in the moment. It won't panic. It won't have this massive burst of adrenaline and like go blank. It's going to know what to do. It's going to have done this before. That's why practice tests are the best way to prepare yourself for the real thing. So make sure to check your answers if they're available and spend some extra time reviewing your weak spots. This is going to help you calibrate the studying properly. No use spending more time on what you already know. A lot of students do this. There's a fallacy in this kind of studying where like students think that if like if they're getting something right, that's really good feedback. And this is a problem because if you are studying stuff you already know and not paying attention to what you don't know, you're just reinforcing the material you do know even better. So if you've already mastered something, there's no use practicing it. So, if you see that problem on a practice test, that's great. Do the problem, get through it, you got it right, good job. But the point of the practice test is to calibrate so you can figure out what you do and don't know. And so take the stuff you don't know and review those units and do more practice problems for those types of problems. If a practice test is not available, you can absolutely make your own by yourself or with friends. So take a couple problems from each homework assignment or the textbook or whatever, put them together in one document and sit somewhere quiet to solve the problems. And if you made this practice test with a group, go with your group and do the practice test either like separately in the same place and then talk through the answers, or do it together. That's actually fine. You're going to get a really good sense of how other people solve problems, and it might actually add to your experience of how you solve problems and make you a more creative and better problem solver to see how other people's brains attack a type of task. And so you don't want to do every practice problem with other people because you need to practice doing it on your own. But like having some time set aside to go over these problems with others or to do one practice test fully with other people can actually be really, really useful for you. You can also use the textbooks to find practice questions. Many of them have like embedded practice problems within chapters, or you'll find them at the end of a unit chapter. And a lot of students don't necessarily use their textbook as often as students did in the past because now a lot of textbooks are digital. And so students don't have them on their desks, they don't see them, they don't frequently flip through them. If this is the case, make sure you do some digging and see what your professors use for a textbook because honestly, you pay for those textbooks in the course materials initiative. So you should use those resources and they're actually really good. And if you're totally at the end of your rope, you have no idea what to do, try asking your professor for some prep sources. The professors create the tests, so they best know kind of like how to study the most effectively. Okay. Now let's talk about actually being at your best physically on the day. So there's a few key things you can do to make sure that you're at your best, and these things are going to help you a lot. Number one is sleep. Make sure to get adequate sleep before the test, and ideally you do this for a few nights in a row because like you might be anxious the night before a test and not sleep well, but if you've gotten good sleep for 3 nights before the test, it's probably going to still be fine. Cramming late into the night is not going to help you any night of that week before the test, but a solid 8 hours is going to help a ton. And there was a Washington Post study published about 3 years ago showing that sleep and GPA are directly correlated. And this is a huge factor that you need to consider in your life as a college student. So you should be sleeping adequately all the time. It is not something you win a prize for if you stay up and pull a lot of all-nighters. In fact, you will probably get the worst prize, which is a less good GPA because these things are directly correlated. So sleep, please get enough sleep. Do not say I'll sleep when I'm dead. Like you need to sleep. You also need to eat right. You have to fuel your brain for it to be at its best. So, if your test is in the morning, eat an adequate meal. If your test is later in the afternoon or the evening, maybe eat 2 or 3 adequate meals. They should have carbs, protein, veggies, fats. Make sure you're full but not feeling gross. So, maybe don't down a cheeseburger 30 minutes before your exam because you might feel some GI distress right during that exam. So, eat enough. Make sure you have a snack before the exam with something that's going to fuel your brain well. Whatever that is for you is going to be what it is for you. Probably not a bunch of candy that's going to cause you to crash in the middle of the exam, but maybe something else. So bring snacks with you. Make sure you have a plan for how to fuel your body the day of the test. Hydration is also key. So make sure you drink plenty of water throughout the day and use the restroom before the test. You don't want to be going into the test having to go to the bathroom. So this is going to really help your brain function as well. And bring your water bottle with you to campus so that you can make sure that you're hydrating all day. Now, the other thing, nothing new. If you're thinking of pounding an energy drink before the test and you have rarely done this, you rarely drink energy drinks, this could be really detrimental to your performance. If you regularly down an energy drink at 3:30 p.m. and you have a test at 4 p.m. and you down an energy drink at 3:30, that is good. That's fine. That is exactly what your body is used to. That's a normal routine. So be smart and put into your body things you know how your body's going to react to. So, we say nothing new on test day. Don't go crazy and have 16 cups of coffee. Like, get up at your normal time, eat your normal foods, drink your normal drinks. Follow the routine and you're not going to have this like extra distress. You're probably already going to have a little bit of body distress if you're anxious. So you don't want to exacerbate that. So do not chug a monster at 3:30 unless you always chug a monster at 3:30. Keep that in mind. Now, speaking of anxiety, do you get anxious? Most people do get anxious. So try writing out those anxious thoughts. Before the test, it can be an hour before the test, 2 hours before, 30 minutes before. Find a quiet place and time to spend 15 to 30 minutes writing out your anxious thoughts. Use your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or just paper. Whatever you use, write those anxious thoughts down. Now, this might seem detrimental because then you're going to say, well, now they're at the front of my mind and I'm more likely to think about them. Wrong. Writing out anxious thoughts helps your brain to clear them away. It helps you to be able to get rid of those things. It's like putting them on an external hard drive. Now you can focus better on the material during the test because you've processed those anxious thoughts already. Even if you're still anxious, the adrenaline response is probably going to be a lot lower during that test. You're going to have the appropriate amount of adrenaline to focus and get you through that test. So, thanks for coming or watching, and we will see you next week with another awesome video.